Chapter 1. Shattered Vows. Mark Ashton adjusted his tie in the mirror of their penthouse bathroom, his fingers working with practiced ease. At 32, he carried himself with quiet confidence, his dark hair neatly styled, his suit well-fitted but not flashy. The sounds of Brittany's laughter drifted in from their bedroom, probably on another call with her social circle. "Darling," Brittany's voice carried a hint of impatience. "The Worthington's charity gala starts in an hour. Are you ready?" Mark stepped out of the bathroom to find his wife, perched on the edge of their king-sized bed, phone in hand. At 30, Brittany Hayes Ashton was a vision in her emerald evening gown, her blonde hair cascading in perfect waves. She barely glanced up from her screen. "Just about," Mark replied, reaching for his watch. "I might have to leave early though." The community center project. Brittany's perfectly manicured fingers paused over her phone. "Again, Mark, these charity projects of yours." She didn't finish the sentence, but her tone said enough. "This important work, Britt. We're creating a space that could change lives in that neighborhood." She hummed, her attention already back on her phone. "Just like the last 3 pro bono projects change lives?" Meanwhile, the Sterlings are breaking ground on their 5th luxury development this year. Mark felt a familiar tightness in his chest. "The Sterlings have different priorities." "Yes, they do," Brittany muttered, rising from the bed. "They prioritize success." The drive to the gala was quiet, filled only with the soft purr of their BMW's engine. Not a luxury vehicle by Brittany's standards, but Mark had always believed in practical choices. He caught her glancing at a passing Bentley, her lips pursing slightly. The Worthington Hotel's grand ballroom buzzed with Manhattan's elite. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead as waiters weaved through the crowd with champagne flutes. Mark watched as Brittany seamlessly slipped into her element, air-kissing acquaintances and laughing at inside jokes. "Mark Ashton," a booming voice cut through the chatter. "The man who builds playgrounds while the rest of us build empires." Chadwick Sterling approached them, his 6'2" frame wrapped in what was undoubtedly a bespoke Italian suit. His father, Victor Sterling, CEO of Sterling Innovations, followed close behind, wearing his usual expression of measured superiority. "Chad," Mark nodded politely. "Some of us believe in giving back to the community." "How noble." Chad's smile didn't reach his eyes. He turned to Brittany, his gaze lingering. "Mrs. Ashton, you look absolutely stunning tonight. That dress is Valentino, isn't it?" Brittany beamed. "Good eye." "Chad, most men wouldn't notice. Most men don't appreciate true quality when they see it." Chad replied smoothly, producing a fresh champagne flute from a passing waiter. "Speaking of which, I'd love your opinion on our newest development project. The penthouse views are breathtaking." Mark watched as his wife's eyes lit up, her body language shifting subtly toward Chad. He told himself it was just networking, just Brittany being her social self. "If you'll excuse me," Mark said, checking his phone, "I need to take this call about the community center." Brittany's smile tightened. "Of course you do." As Mark stepped away, he heard Chad's voice. "Your husband's dedication to charity is admirable, but surely a woman like you deserves someone with bigger ambitions?" "The comments don't." But Mark pushed it aside. He had a conference call with his team about the center's accessibility features. That was what mattered, wasn't it? The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Mark threw himself into the community center project, working late into the night. Brittany filled her days with charity lunches and social events, her phone constantly buzzing with messages. One evening, Mark came home early, hoping to surprise her with dinner reservations at her favorite restaurant. He found her dressed for going out, applying a final touch of lipstick. "Perfect timing," he said. "I got a sateable at Lou Bernardine." Brittany's hand paused. "Oh, I have plans already. The Sterlings are hosting a private viewing of their new property development. The same development Chad mentioned at the gala? Don't start?" "Mark," Brittany sighed. "It's networking. You know how important connections are in this city." "I know," Mark conceded. "I just miss spending time with you. Maybe if you spent less time on pro bono work and more time building your actual career." She let the words hang in the air. "I have to go." "Don't wait up." The pattern continued. Brittany's absences grew longer, her excuses more elaborate. Mark buried himself deeper in his work, telling himself that once the community center was complete, things would improve. One afternoon, his best friend Daniel Reynolds dropped by his office. The lawyer's usually cheerful face was creased with concern. "Mark, we need to talk. About the center's permits? I thought we had everything in order. Not about work." Daniel settled into a chair. "About Brittany." Mark's fingers stilled over his keyboard. "What about her? I saw her yesterday. At the Mark Hotel, probably another charity lunch. With Chad Sterling, looking very intimate." Mark's jaw tightened. "They're colleagues, Daniel. The Sterlings are important people in our circle." "Mark," Daniel leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm your best friend. I'm also a lawyer who's seen enough divorce cases to recognize the signs. Brittany's behavior has changed. The late nights, the sudden interest in the Sterlings projects, the way she looks at Chad. That's enough." Mark cut him off. "Brittany wouldn't. She's not that kind of person." But that night, as he lay awake in their bed, Brittany sighed cold and empty. Daniel's words echoed in his mind. The seeds of doubt had been planted, taking root in the fertile soil of his growing unease. The community center project progressed, but Mark's home life continued to unravel. Brittany's clothes multiplied. Her social calendar packed with events he wasn't invited to. When they did attend functions together, she gravitated toward Chad Sterling, laughing too loudly at his jokes, standing too close. At a museum fundraiser, Mark overheard two women whispering behind their champagne flutes. Per Mark Ashton. He has no idea. Does he? Brittany's been spending an awful lot of time at the Sterling's new development. Can you blame her? Chad Sterling is worth billions. Mark's just comfortable. The words burrowed under his skin, but he smiled and nodded through the evening, watching his wife dance with Chad, their bodies moving with practiced familiarity. Later that night, as Brittany stumbled into their apartment, her cheeks flushed from champagne, Mark asked, "Are you happy with me?" She paused, mascara slightly smudged, looking at him as if seeing him for the first time. "What kind of question is that?" "A simple one." Brittany laughed, but it wasn't the warm sound he'd fallen in love with. "Happy? With your modest ambitions and your charity projects? While my friends vacation in Monaco and collect summer homes like stamps." She kicked off her heels. "I'm surviving." "Mark, that's different from happy." The words hit him like physical blows, but he maintained his composure. "I thought we wanted the same things. A meaningful life. Making a difference. We wanted those things in our 20s. She cut him off. "I've grown up. Maybe it's time you did too." She disappeared into their bedroom, leaving Mark alone with the truth he'd been avoiding. The woman he loved was slipping away and he didn't know how to stop it. Chapter 2. The Revelation. The autumn evening carried a bite of approaching winter as Mark drove home from the community center site. Construction was ahead of schedule, but his triumph felt hollow without someone to share it with. On impulse, he stopped at Brittany's favorite potty 3, picking up the chocolate, a clear she loved. The pin house was quiet when he entered. The lights dimmed. "Britt," he called out, setting the pastry box on the kitchen counter. No answer. A buzzing sound drew his attention. Brittany's secondary phone, the one she claimed was for work emergencies, late forgotten on the marble countertop. As Mark moved to plug it in, a message notification illuminated the screen. "Chad, miss you already. Can't wait for tomorrow. Our usual suite?" Mark's hand trembled as he picked up the phone. More messages appeared. "Brittany, last night was amazing. Mark's working late again. His loss. Chad, he doesn't deserve you. A woman like you needs a real man. Not some charitable architect playing at success. Brittany, soon. Baby, just need to handle things delicately. Don't want to mess up the prenup." The pastry box fell to the floor as Mark scrolled through months of messages, each one more damning than the last. Pictures, hotel receipts, private jokes about his obliviousness. His world contracted to the glowing screen in his hands, reality crumbling around him. The sound of keys in the door barely registered. Brittany swept in, shopping bags on her arm, humming softly. She froze when she saw Mark standing in the kitchen, her phone in his hand. "Mark." Her voice wavered. "What are you doing with my phone?" He looked up, his face carved from stone. "How long?" "I don't know what you're—" "Don't." The word cut through the air like a blade. "How long?" Brittany's facade cracked, then shattered. Her laugh was brittle, cutting. "Long enough to know what I've been missing." "Missing?" Mark's voice was dangerously quiet. "We built a life together. We had dreams, plans." "Your dreams, Mark. Your plans." She dropped her shopping bags. her perfect mask falling away to reveal something harder, colder. Community centers and affordable housing. While I watch my friends jet off to Paris for lunch. While I squeeze into last season's Gucci because my husband thinks modesty is a virtue. So that's what this is about. Money? It's about ambition. Status. Things you clearly don't understand. Brittany's words dripped with disdain. Chad gets it. He knows what it means to truly succeed in the city. And what does success look like? Brittany? Sneaking around in hotel rooms? Planning how to circumvent our prenup? Her eyes narrowed. You read my private messages. Your messages with your lover? On the phone I pay for? Mark's laugh was hollow. Should I apologize for interrupting your affair? Affairs happened all the time in our circle, Mark. The difference is most husbands are too busy building their empires to notice. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a cruel whisper. But you? You're too busy playing savior to the poor to see what's right in front of you. Get out. The words were quiet but final. Excuse me? Get out. Mark's control slipped, his voice rising. Pack your things and get out of my home. Your home? Brittany laughed. This place? This life? It's nothing compared to what Chad can give me. What he already gives me. She strode to their bedroom, emerging minutes later with a pre-packed overnight bag. Of course she had one ready. My lawyers will be in touch. Try not to let your bleeding heart bankrupt you in the divorce. The doors slammed behind her, leaving Mark alone in the penthouse that had once felt like home. He stood there, motionless, as night fell over the city. His phone buzzed repeatedly. Probably Daniel checking in. He ignored it. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Sterile conference rooms replacing courtrooms. Daniel, serving as Mark's lawyer, fought fiercely against Brittany's attempts to claim half of his assets. She's trying to paint you as emotionally negligent, Daniel explained during one strategy session. Claims your focus on charitable work constituted abandonment. Mark stared out the office window. Let her have the furniture, the art. I don't care, Mark. She's not just after the furniture. She wants your savings, your investments. I said I don't care. Mark turned to his friend. I just want this over. But Brittany and Chad weren't content with a quiet dissolution. They turned their affair into a society spectacle, appearing together at every high-profile event. Mark couldn't escape them. Their pictures dominated social media. Their names whispered at every function. At the annual Architects Guild dinner, an event Mark couldn't avoid, Chad made sure to parade Brittany past his table. She wore a dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Diamonds dripping from her ears. Mark, she purred. Chad's arm possessively around her waist. Still working on that little community center? Actually, Chad interjected. I heard it's having permit issues. Such a shame when amateur projects fall apart. Mark maintained his composure. Years of dealing with difficult clients coming in handy. The center is doing fine, Chad, but I'm sure you have more interesting things to discuss. Hotel suites to book, perhaps? Brittany's smile faltered slightly. But Chad laughed. Better than booking contractor meetings and low-income neighborhoods. Tell me, Mark, how does it feel knowing your wife traded up? Ex-wife, Mark corrected, rising from his seat. And I wouldn't call trading dignity for dollars up. But we all have different standards. He left them there, their laughter following him out of the ballroom. In the taxi home, he finally allowed himself to feel the full weight of his humiliation, his failure, his loss. The next morning, as he sat in his home office reviewing construction documents, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made him answer. Mark Ashton speaking. Hello, son. The voice was deep, authoritative, and achingly familiar. We need to talk. Mark's breath caught in his throat. Dad, I've been watching what's happening with you and Brittany. George Ashton's voice carried decades of power and influence. I think it's time I stepped in. After 15 years of minimal contact. Now you want to step in? I know I've been absent. Focus on building Ashton Industries instead of being there for you. But I've always kept an eye on you, son. And what these people are doing to you. It ends now. Mark gripped the phone tighter. What are you suggesting? Come to my office tomorrow. Ashton Industries headquarters. It's time you learned what real power looks like. The line went dead, leaving Mark staring at his phone. His father's words echoing in his mind. After years of maintaining his independence from his father's wealth and influence, was he really considering this? His eyes fell on a society magazine on his desk. Chad and Brittany's smiling faces mocking him from the cover. Maybe it was time to stop playing by their rules. Maybe it was time to show them what an Ashton was truly capable of. Chapter 3. Whispers of Inheritance. The Ashton Industries Tower pierced the Manhattan skyline like a spear of glass and steel. Its 90 stories dwarfing the surrounding buildings. Mark stood in the lobby. His architects are appreciating the seamless blend of power and elegance in the design. How many times had he passed this building, pretending it had nothing to do with him? Mr. Ashton. A polished executive assistant approached him. Your father is expecting you. Please follow me. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, each passing floor marking another step toward a confrontation 15 years in the making. The assistant led him through a series of increasingly opulent offices until they reached a massive set of double doors. Go right in, sir. Mark pushed through the doors into what could have been a modern-day throne room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a godlike view of the city while priceless art adorned the walls. Behind an imposing desk of polished mahogany sat George Ashton, looking exactly as Mark remembered, silver hair immaculately styled. His posture radiating authority even while seated. At 65, George Ashton carried the weight of his empire with practiced ease. George rose, circling his desk. You look well. Do I? Mark met his father's gaze. Because I feel like hell. George's expression softened marginally. I know. I've been monitoring the situation. Your divorce. The Sterling boys' interference, all of it. Monitoring. Mark's laugh was bitter. That's what you do best, isn't it? Watch from a distance while you insisted on making your own way, George interrupted. While you rejected every offer of help, determined to prove yourself without the Ashton name. I wanted to succeed on my own merits, and you have. George gestured to a leather chair. Sit, we have much to discuss. Mark sank into the chair, the leather creaking softly. George returned to his desk, pressing a button on his intercom. Sarah, hold all my calls and bring in the Sterling Industries files. The Sterling files? Mark leaned forward. What are you planning? Planning? George's smile was razor sharp. I'm planning to show my son exactly what he's been denying himself all these years. He pulled up a holographic display projecting financial charts into the air between them. Ashton Industries, Mark, current market value just over $5 billion. Holdings in technology, real estate, pharmaceuticals, clean energy. And that's just the public face. Mark stared at the floating numbers, each digit representing more money than he'd ever dreamed of handling. Why show me this now? Because it's time you took your place in this company. Not as my son, but as my successor. The word hung in the air between them. Successor. Mark's mind raised with implications, possibilities, consequences. And the Sterlings? Victor Sterling's company? A minor holding in our portfolio. One that's about to become even more minor. George's eyes glittered. Did you know Sterling Innovations is facing a hostile takeover? No? That's because it hasn't happened yet. A knock at the door interrupted them. The assistant entered with a thick folder, placing it on George's desk before quietly withdrawing. Your friend Daniel, George continued, he's a good lawyer. But he's fighting this battle with a pocket knife. I'm offering you a nuclear arsenal. Mark stood, pacing to the windows. Below, the city sprawled out like a chessboard, and for the first time, he saw it through his father's eyes, not as a collection of buildings and streets, but as a field of play, where power and influence were the only rules that mattered. The community center, he said, finally, the one I'm building. Chad and Brittany have been trying to block its permits, spread rumors about structural issues. Consider those problems solved. George pressed another button, and a new set of documents appeared in the air. In fact, consider the entire project fully funded. With a few improvements, of course. The Ashton Community Center has a nice ring to it. Don't you think? Mark turned back to his father. Why now? After all these years? Because watching that gold-digging socialite and her trust fund boy toy try to destroy my son's life has awakened something in me. George stood, his presence filling the room. Something I should have embraced years ago. Fatherhood. The moment was interrupted by a commotion outside. Voices raised, protest from the assistant, then the doors burst open. Brittany strode in. Chad and Victor Sterling close behind. She wore a suit that probably cost more than most cars. Her face a mask of practice to stain. The mask slipped momentarily when she saw Mark. What are you doing here? She demanded. Then caught herself, lips curving into a cruel smile. Did you come here to beg for a job, per boy? Chad laughed, adjusting his Italian silk tie. Sorry, old sport. but poor men aren't allowed in this building. Victor Sterling stepped forward. All corporate smoothness. George, I wasn't aware we had company. Perhaps we should reschedule our meeting. Oh no. George's voice cut through the room like Arctic wind. This meeting is happening exactly when it should. He turned to Victor. You're fired. The words dropped into the silence like stones into a pond. Victor's face drained of color. What? Fired. Terminated. Released from your position. George's smile was terrifying in its calmness. And once the board reviews the evidence of your incompetence and your son's corporate espionage attempts, you'll be lucky if firing is all that happens. Chad's arrogance crumbled. Corporate espionage? That's ridiculous. Is it? George pressed another button. And new documents fill the air. Shall we discuss the attempted sabotage of the community center? The falsified permit issues? The bribes to city officials? Brittany stepped back, her heels catching on the plush carpet. Her eyes darted between Chad, who looked increasingly panicked, and Mark, who stood silently beside his father. You can't do this. Victor protested. Sterling Innovations is now majority owned by Ashton Industries. George finished. Has been for months through a series of shell companies. I was waiting for the right moment to reveal that particular card. He turned to Mark. Would you like to do the honors, son? Mark stepped forward, feeling the weight of the Ashton name settling onto his shoulders like armor. Get out. All of you. Mark. Brittany's voice turned pleading, her mask cracking completely. You don't understand. I never meant. Save it for the tabloids. Mark cut her off. I'm sure they'll be very interested in this story. The social climbing trophy wife, the trust fund playboy, and the corporate corruption that brought them all down. Chad's face contorted with rage. This is an overish kin. Oh, but it is. George said softly. Security will escort you out. And do remember, this building doesn't allow poor people. As security led the shell-shock trio away, Mark turned to his father. The office felt different now. Less like a foreign territory and more like an inheritance. A birthright he denied for too long. Thank you, he said simply. George nodded, understanding all the words unspoken between them. Welcome to Ashton Industries, son. Shall we begin? The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. In his father's office, high above the city that had nearly broken him, Mark Ashton began to learn what real power looked like. The fall was over. The rise was about to begin. Chapter 4. The Phoenix Rises. Mark's fingers traced over the embossed business cards on his new desk. Mark Ashton, Senior Executive Director, Ashton Industries. The weight of the title pressed down on him like a physical thing. 3 months had passed since the confrontation in his father's office, and the learning curve had been steep. Your 9 o'clock is here, Mr. Ashton. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. The infrastructure development team. Send them in, Claire. 6 executives filed into his office, their nervous energy palpable. Mark had earned a reputation for thoroughness, bordering on ruthlessness and project reviews. George's training had been intensive, relentless. Show me the plans, Mark commanded, and holographic displays spring to life, showing detailed projections of upcoming developments. As the team presented, Mark's mind wandered to his father's words from their morning meeting. Power isn't about making people fear you, son. It's about making them respect you enough that fear becomes unnecessary. These profit margins, Mark interrupted the presentation, zooming in on a particular section. They're inflated. You're not accounting for the new environmental regulations taking effect next quarter. The team leader, Peterson, blanched. Sir, we thought. You thought wrong. Mark's voice remained level. Redo the calculations. I want real numbers, not wishful thinking. We build on solid ground here. Gentlemen, dismissed. As they hurried out, Daniel stuck his head in. Brutal as ever. I see. Mark smiled at his friend. Now Ashton Industries' chief legal officer. They'll learn. How's the Sterling situation? Daniel dropped into a chair, loosening his tie. Victor's trying to rally support among minor shareholders. But nobody wants to back a sinking ship. The evidence of their corporate espionage is too damning. And Chad still making threats. But his lawyer's smarter than he is. They know we have enough to bury them. Mark nodded, pulling up another holographic display. What about the security breaches? That's actually why I'm here. Daniel leaned forward. We need better cybersecurity. The attacks are getting more sophisticated. Brittany and Chad. Probably. They're desperate, which makes them dangerous. Mark pressed a button on his intercom. Claire, get me Isabella Rossi from IT security. Immediately, 20 minutes later, Isabella Isa Rossi strode into his office. At 30, she carried herself with the confident precision of someone who knew exactly how valuable she was. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her suit professional but unremarkable. The kind of person most would overlook in a crowd. Mark had learned that was exactly how she liked it. Mr. Ashton, she greeted him, then nodded to Daniel. Mr. Reynolds, I assume this is about the recent security probes. Bring me up to speed. Mark instructed. Isa pulled out her tablet, projecting her own set of data. We've detected multiple attempted intrusions over the past week. Sophisticated ones. They're targeting project files, financial records, personal communications. Can you stop them? I already have. A hint of pride colored her voice. But they'll try again. They're using cutting-edge tech. Mr. Ashton, someone's bankrolling these attacks. The Sterlings. Daniel supplied. What do you need? Mark asked. Isa's eyes lit up. Give me a team, full autonomy, and access to the quantum computing division. Done. Mark made a note. But I want more than defense. I want to know everything they're planning before they plan it. Sir. Isa hesitated. That level of surveillance might not be entirely legal. Daniel interjected. Leave that to me. I'll drop the paperwork to make it ironclad. Mark studied Isa's face, noting her hesitation. Ms. Rossi, do you know what they're trying to do to this company? To me, I've heard rumors. They're not just attacking a corporation. They're attacking my family's legacy. My father's life's work. Mark stood, moving to stand before her. I need to know. Are you with us? Isa met his gaze, and something shifted in her expression. Yes, sir. I'm with you. Good. Daniel will handle the legal framework. You'll report directly to me. After they left, Mark sat in his office, watching the city lights emerge as dusk settled. His phone buzzed, a message from George. Dinner tonight. Need to discuss the European expansion. These dinners had become a regular occurrence. George was making up for lost time, teaching Mark everything he knew about running an empire. The lessons were brutal but necessary. A notification popped up on his screen. A Society page article featuring Brittany and Chad at some gala. Their smiles looked strange now. Their clothes a bit less cutting edge. The sterling fortune was dwindling. Their social capital evaporating. Mark closed the article. They didn't matter anymore. He had bigger concerns now. The next morning, Isa was waiting in his office with her preliminary report. They're planning something big, she said without preamble. I've intercepted communications between Chad and several known corporate raiders. They're trying to piece together enough capital for one last attack. Let them try. Mark pulled up the company's defense protocols. We'll be ready. There's more. Isa hesitated. Your ex-wife. She's been making calls too. To journalists, investors, anyone who might listen. She's trying to spin a story about corruption at Ashton Industries. Mark's jaw tightened. Evidence. None that would stand up. But, in the court of public opinion, handle it. The words came out sharper than he intended. Sorry. Just do what needs to be done. Isa nodded. But lingered. Mr. Ashton. Mark. Are you sure this is what you want? This level of surveillance of control. What I want. Mark laughed softly. What I want is to never be blindsided again. To never watch someone I trusted tear my life apart while I stood by. Oblivious. And after? When you've won. What then? The question caught him off guard. Just remember why you started this. Isa said quietly. Don't let the power become the point. She left him with those words echoing in his mind. But there was no time for philosophical debates. The empire needed protecting. The weeks blurred together in a haze of meetings, strategic planning, and late-night strategy sessions. Mark learned to navigate boardrooms like battlefields, to read financial reports like war dispatches. George watched his transformation with a mixture of pride and concern. You're becoming quite the corporate warrior, his father remarked one evening over scotch. I learned from the best. Just remember, the goal isn't to destroy them, son. It's to win. But sometimes Mark wondered if there was a difference anymore. Chapter 5. The Price of Power. The headline blazed across Mark's tablet. Ashton Heir. Corporate Crusader or Power Mad Prince. The article beneath was a masterpiece of innuendo and half-truths. painting him as a vengeful son using his father's empire to wage personal vendettas. Brittany's handiwork, Daniel said, scanning the piece. She always did have a way with the press. Mark tossed the tablet aside. Get our PR team on it. And find out which journalist wrote this hit piece. Already done. But Daniel shifted uncomfortably. They're not stopping there. They're going after all of us now. What do you mean? The Bar Association received an anonymous complaint about my handling of your divorce. Allegations of evidence tampering. Witness intimidation. Mark's hands curled into fists. They're targeting you to get to me. It gets worse. Someone leaked ISA's college records. Doctor to show academic misconduct. It's all lies. But her reputation. Where is she? In her office. She's been there all night, trying to trace the leak. Mark found ISA surrounded by holographic displays. Her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. She didn't look up when he entered. I almost have them. She muttered. The trail leads through 7 proxy servers. But there's a pattern. Issa. Mark's voice cut through her focus. Go home. Get some rest. They're trying to destroy everything I've built. Her voice cracked slightly. My credentials. My reputation. Let them try. Mark moved closer, shutting down her displays with a gesture. We'll fight back. Together. She finally looked at him. Vulnerability breaking through her professional mask. Why? Why risk your own reputation defending me? Because you're one of mine now. And I protect my people. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. For a moment, neither moved. Then Issa straightened, professional demeanor sliding back into place. I found something in their communication patterns. They're not just attacking us randomly. There's a plan. Show me. She brought up a new display, showing a complex web of connections. They're trying to force a shareholder vote. If they can create enough doubt about your leadership, about the company's stability, they think they can convince the board to remove me. Mark studied the patterns. Clever. That's not all. ISA highlighted several nodes. These transactions. Someone's feeding them inside information. We have a mole. The revelation should have angered him. But Mark felt oddly calm. Can you find them? Given time. Yes. But Mark, what they're doing to your reputation. To all of us. It's personal. Of course it's personal. They can't beat us in business. So they're trying to destroy us socially. Mark's voice hardened. What they don't understand is that I'm not playing their game anymore. I'm playing mine. He returned to his office to find George waiting. The board is concerned. His father said without preamble. About the articles? The allegations? About you. George sat heavily. They think you're too focused on personal vendettas. That you're letting emotion cloud your judgment. And what do you think? I think you're becoming exactly what they accused you of being. George's voice was gentle but firm. A man consumed by power and revenge. They started this. And you'll finish it. But at what cost? George stood, moving to face his son. I taught you how to wield power, Mark, but I never meant for it to wield you. The words stung because they contained a kernel of truth. Mark had changed. He felt it in the way people looked at him now. With respect? Yes. But also fear. Even Daniel seemed hesitant around him sometimes. That night, unable to sleep, Mark found himself in the office gym, pounding a punching bag with measured fury. He didn't hear Issa enter until she spoke. Your form's terrible. He stopped breathing hard. Didn't know you were a boxing expert. There's a lot you don't know about me. She moved closer, adjusting his stance. You're telegraphing your moves. Makes you predictable. Like I'm being now. With the Sterlings. You said it. Not me. She stepped back. But yes, you're letting them dictate your actions. Dancing to their tune. What would you suggest? Stop reacting. Start thinking strategically. She met his gaze. The Mark asked and I first met wanted to build things. Not destroy them. What happened to him? The question hit harder than any punch. What had happened to that, Mark asked. The one who dreamed of community centers and affordable housing. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. Daniel's message was brief. Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow. They're making their move. Mark looked at Issa. Saw the concern in her eyes. I need you to find that mole. Tonight. Already working on it. She hesitated. Mark? Whatever happens tomorrow, remember who you are. Not who they're trying to make you become. He watched her leave. Her words echoing in his mind. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of his original purpose. The question was, could he find it again without losing everything he'd built? Chapter 6. The Web of Deceit. The boardroom hummed with tension as Mark took his seat at the head of the table. 24 pairs of eyes watched him, some sympathetic, others calculating. George sat to his right, facing passive. This emergency session will come to order. The board secretary announced. We're here to address concerns about recent company direction and leadership decisions. Mark's phone buzzed silently. A message from I say. Found the mole. You won't believe who it is. Coming up now. Before we begin. Mark stood, buttoning his jacket. I believe we have some housekeeping to address. The boardroom doors opened. And I say strode in, tablet in hand. Behind her came security, escorting a struggling figure. Janet Chen, head of Asian operations, and one of the board's most vocal critics of Mark's leadership. Miss Chen, Mark's voice carried to the corners of the room. Would you like to explain the $10 million deposited in your Cayman Islands account? Or shall I? The room erupted in whispers. Janet's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about. She stammered. I say stepped forward, projecting financial records into the air. 3 payments, all traced back to shell companies owned by Sterling Innovations, in exchange for confidential Ashton Industries data. That's impossible. Is it? Mark circled the table slowly. Just like it's impossible that you've been feeding information to Chad Sterling, that you helped orchestrate this entire smear campaign. You can't prove. Actually, Daniel spoke up from the doorway. We can prove all of it. The evidence has already been sent to the SEC. They're very interested in speaking with you. Security led the shell-shocked board member away, as Mark addressed the remaining directors. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been manipulated. Led to believe that my personal vendetta against the Sterlings was damaging this company. He paused, letting his words sink in. The truth is, they've been trying to destroy us from within. And some of you helped them. The accusations in the room shifted like wind changing direction. Board members who'd been ready to challenge Mark's leadership now sat in uncomfortable silence. But that ends today. Mark pulled up new projections. While you've been concerned about my personal motivations, Ashton Industries has increased market share by 15%. Our clean energy division has secured contracts in 3 new countries. And our community development initiative has created thousands of jobs. George watched his son with undisguised pride as Mark continued. Now, we can waste more time questioning my leadership, or we can focus on what matters. Growing this company, creating value, and making a real difference in the world. The vote that followed was unanimous. Mark retained his position with full board backing. As the directors filed out, Daniel approached with new information. The SEC is moving on Sterling Innovations. The evidence of their market manipulation is irrefutable. And Chad trying to liquidate assets, but we've frozen most of their accounts. Legally, he added with a grim smile. I say join them. Her tablet displaying more data. Their entire network is falling apart. The press has turned on them. Seems Brittany's journalist friends don't like backing losers. Mark nodded. Satisfaction warring with a strange emptiness. Make sure Ms. Chen's cooperation with authorities is well publicized. I want everyone to know the price of betraying Ashton Industries. Later, in his office, George found him staring out at the city. You handled that well, his father said. Though I suspect you knew about Chen's betrayal before today. 3 days ago, Mark admitted. ISA discovered it. But we needed the right moment. Theatrical. George chuckled. But effective. The board won't challenge you again. They shouldn't have challenged me in the first place. No. George studied his son. You've changed, Mark. The board saw it. I see it. The question is, do you? Before Mark could respond, his phone lit up with an urgent message. Chad Sterling was holding a press conference. Mark switched on the office's media wall, where Chad's face appeared, strained and sweating despite expensive grooming. Brittany stood beside him, her outfit slightly less polished than usual, her smile brittle. Sterling Innovations has been the victim of a coordinated attack, Chad declared, his voice cracking slightly. These allegations of market manipulation are completely false. Send it, Mark commanded into his phone. On screen, Chad faltered as his phone buzzed. His face went pale as he read the message. Mr. Sterling, a reporter called out. Can you comment on the evidence just released showing your company's illegal trading activities? Another reporter jumped in. What about the documented bribes to city officials? The SEC investigation into your personal accounts? Chad's composure crumbled. No comment. This press conference is over. Brittany grabbed his arm, trying to pull him away from the podium. But the damage was done. The videos of Chad's meltdown spread across social media within minutes. Perfect timing, I say, remarked, entering the office. The trading algorithms you asked me to track, they just triggered. Sterling Innovation stock is in free fall. Daniel arrived moments later, legal documents in hand. The SEC is moving in. Victor Sterling just called. He's willing to testify against his own son in exchange for leniency. Like father, like son, George commented dryly. Both willing to betray each other to save themselves. Mark watched the chaos unfold on multiple screens. News reports, stock tickers, social media reactions. The empire Chad and his father had built was crumbling in real time. Sir Isa's voice carried a note of concern. There's movement at Sterling Tower. Security cameras show them removing files. Hard drives? Already handled. Mark assured her. The FBI is waiting for them. Destroying evidence will only add to their charges. The next few hours passed in a blur of reports and reactions. Sterling Innovation stock continued to plummet. Board members resigned en masse. Long-buried scandals suddenly found their way to eager journalists. As evening fell, Mark's private elevator chimed. The doors opened to reveal a disheveled Chad and a tear-streaked Brittany. You have some nerve coming here. Daniel started. But Mark held up a hand. Let them speak. Please, Brittany stepped forward. Her voice trembling. You've made your point. You've won. Just tell us what you want. What I want. Mark's voice was eerily calm. I want you to understand exactly what you did. Not just to me, but to everyone you've hurt with your games and schemes. We can make a deal. Chad tried, desperation evident in his voice. We have information about other companies. Other executives. Always trying to trade up. Aren't you? Mark cut him off. Always looking for the next better deal. The next person to betray. He slid a folder across his desk. These documents detail your crimes. The corporate espionage. The market manipulation. The bribes. The FBI has copies. The SEC has copies. The only question is, do you want to cooperate now? Or make things worse for yourselves? Chad grabbed the folder, hands shaking as he read. This will destroy us. Like you tried to destroy me? Mark stood. The difference is, I'm doing this legally. Everything documented. Everything by the book. Mark. Brittany's voice cracked. Please. I'm sorry. I never meant. Save your performances for the court. He interrupted. You'll need them. Security arrived to escort them out. As they reached the door, Mark called after them. Oh, and Chad, remember what you said about poor men not being allowed in this building? He smiled coldly. You might want to start getting used to being poor. After they left, silence fell over the office. George placed a hand on Mark's shoulder. It's done, son. You've won. Mark stared out at the city lights, feeling strangely hollow. Have I? Sometimes I wonder what winning really means. It means you survived. Isa said quietly. You fought back and you won. But at what cost? Mark turned to face them. His father. Daniel. Isa? The people who had stood by him through it all. Look at what I've become. You became what you needed to be. George replied. The question is, what will you become now? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Mark Ashton had risen from the ashes of his old life, transformed into something powerful, formidable. But as he stood in his tower watching his enemies retreat, he wondered if the price of power might be higher than even he had calculated. The night deepened over Manhattan, the city's lights twinkling like stars. In offices across town, the remains of Sterling Innovations crumbled. In penthouses and clubs, the social elite whispered about the fall of Chad and Brittany. And in his office atop Ashton Tower, Mark Ashton contemplated the true cost of victory. Act 2 had reached its end. The phoenix had risen. Vengeance had been achieved. But the story wasn't over. For in the depths of triumph, new questions arose. Questions about purpose, redemption, and the weight of power. But those answers would have to wait for another chapter. Chapter 7. Choices and Consequences. The mahogany conference table in Mark's office seemed to stretch endlessly as Chad Sterling and Brittany sat across from him, their lawyers flanking them like nervous sentinels. The morning sun illuminated the room, highlighting the deep circles under Chad's eyes and the slight tremor in Brittany's manicured hands. Here's our offer. Chad's lawyer pushed a document folder across the table. Mr. Sterling is willing to provide detailed information about corporate irregularities at Maxwell Industries and Thomson Global. Information that could be valuable to Ashton Industries. Mark didn't touch the folder. More betrayals. That's your bargaining chip. Information is power. Chad leaned forward, desperation bleeding through his practiced confidence. These companies, their CEOs, they're all dirty. We can help you take them down. The way you try to take me down. Mark's voice remained level. The way you're trying to sell out your father's associates to save yourself. Brittany placed her hand on Chad's arm, silencing him. Mark, please. We're trying to make this right. Make it right. Mark finally opened the folder, scanning its contents. You're trying to trade other people's secrets to escape consequences. That's not making anything right. That's just being who you've always been. We're facing serious prison time. Chad's lawyer interjected. My client is merely trying to do what he always does. Mark cut him off. Find someone else to step on. He closed the folder. The answer is no. You're making a mistake. Chad's composure cracked. These people, they're worse than us. They've done things. I don't care what they've done. This isn't about them. This is about you facing the consequences of your actions. Brittany's lawyer cleared her throat. Ms. Hayes is prepared to make a public statement. A full admission of her role in the corporate espionage, the smear campaign. In exchange for what? Mark asked coldly. It reduced sentence. House arrest instead of prison. Mark studied his ex-wife's face. The perfect makeup couldn't hide her fear now. You really haven't learned anything? Have you? Still trying to manipulate your way out of trouble. What do you want from us? Brittany burst out. Money? Public humiliation? You've already taken everything. I want justice. Mark stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Not revenge. Not anymore. Just justice. The door opened and Daniel entered, followed by 2 FBI agents. Your client's cooperation won't be necessary. He informed the lawyers. We have enough evidence for multiple felony convictions. You can't do this. Chad stood, his chair scraping back. My father. His cooperating fully with the authorities. One of the FBI agents cut in. He's very interested in discussing your role in the market manipulation scheme. Brittany's composure finally shattered. He's lying. Victor would never. He already has. Daniel produced a tablet showing Victor Sterling's signed confession. Turns out family loyalty only goes so far when you're facing 20 years in federal prison. As the agents led Chad and Brittany away, Mark caught a final glimpse of their faces. Shock giving way to the dawning realization that their world had truly ended. Isay appeared in the doorway after they left. That was intense. They're still trying to play games. Mark shook his head. Still think they can manipulate their way out of anything. People rarely change their nature. She moved into the room, setting a tablet on his desk. The FBI found more evidence in Sterling Tower. Decades of corruption, fraud, bribes. The whole empire was built on lies. Like father, like son, Daniel commented. Mark picked up the tablet, scanning the findings. Send copies to the SEC and the Justice Department. Make sure nothing gets buried. Already done. Isay hesitated. There's something else. Brittany's been trying to contact your father. Mark's head snapped up. What? She sent him a private message, claiming she has information about threats to Ashton Industries. Information she'll only share with him personally. More manipulation. Daniel scoffed. She's desperate. Probably. Isay agreed. But what? But people do desperate things when they're cornered. Maybe we should at least hear what she has to say. Mark studied Isay's face, noting the concern in her eyes. You think she's actually found something? I think dismissing her entirely might be a mistake. Even a cornered rat can be dangerous. The metaphor hung in the air as Mark considered his options. Set up a meeting. But not with my father. With me. Mark. Daniel started to protest. In a public place, Mark continued. Somewhere neutral. And have security standing by. Isay nodded, making notes on her tablet. I'll arrange it. Later that evening, Mark sat in his father's study, sharing the day's events over aged scotch. You're taking an unnecessary risk. George warned. Meeting with her serves no purpose. Maybe. Mark swirled the amber liquid in his glass. But something about this feels wrong. Brittany's manipulative. Yes, but she's not stupid. She wouldn't reach out without a reason. The reason is she's desperate. George set down his glass. She's trying to create leverage where none exists. Perhaps. But what if she's not? What if there's something we've missed? George studied his son's face. You've changed, Mark. A month ago, you wouldn't have even considered hearing her out. A month ago, I was focused solely on revenge. Now Mark paused. Now I want to make sure we've considered all angles. That justice is really served. And this has nothing to do with Miss Rossi's influence. Mark's hand stilled on his glass. What do you mean? I'm not blind, son. I see how you look at her. How carefully you consider her advice. George's voice softened. She's good for you. Helps you see beyond the immediate satisfaction of revenge. Before Mark could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from Isay, meeting arranged. Tomorrow, noon, St. Regis rooftop restaurant. Well, Mark showed his father the message. I guess we'll find out what Brittany's game is. The next morning, Mark stood in his office, preparing for the meeting. Daniel paced nearby, clearly unhappy with the arrangement. At least let me come with you, his friend insisted. No, she'll be more likely to talk if it's just me. Mark checked his watch. Have the security team in place? 2 plainclothes officers at the bar. 2 more by the entrance. Isay's monitoring all communications in and out of the building. A knock at the door interrupted them. Isay entered. Her face serious. The surveillance team just reported in. Brittany arrived early. She's alone, but what? She's been making calls. Lots of them. And we can't trace who she's talking to. Mark considered this information. Keep monitoring. If anything feels wrong, we'll shut it down immediately. Isay promised. She moved closer, adjusting his ties slightly. Be careful. The gesture was professional, but her fingers lingered a moment too long. Mark caught her hand before she could step back. I will. He promised softly. The St. Regis rooftop offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. But Mark barely noticed it as he approached the table where Brittany waited. She wore a simple black dress. Her usual flash of jewelry notably absent. Mark, she stood as he approached. Thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries. He sat across from her. What's so important that you needed to speak to my father? Brittany glanced around before leaning forward. What I'm about to tell you. It could change everything. But I need assurances first. You're not in a position to demand anything. This isn't about demands. Her voice dropped to a whisper. This is about survival. Yours, mine, all of us. Mark studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Explain. Shad wasn't working alone. Neither was Victor. There's someone else. Someone bigger behind all of this. She pulled out a small USB drive. This contains proof. Proof of what? Brittany's hands shook slightly as she pushed the drive across the table. Proof that Ashton Industries has been targeted for years. That would happen to you. To us. It was all part of a larger plan. Mark didn't touch the drive. Why should I believe anything you say? Because I was part of it. Brittany's eyes filled with tears. But I didn't know. I didn't understand how deep it went until it was too late. Before Mark could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from Isay. Something's wrong. The drive is emitting a signal. Don't touch it. Mark's training kicked in. He stood smoothly, buttoning his jacket. This meeting is over. Mark, please? Brittany reached for his arm. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. He signaled to the security team. That drive contains malware, doesn't it? A Trojan to infiltrate Ashton Industry systems. Brittany's face crumbled. They made me do it. They said if I didn't. Who made you? Who are you working for? But before she could answer, chaos erupted in the restaurant. Shots rang out. Patrons screamed. And Mark felt himself being tackled to the ground by security as glass shattered overhead. Through the chaos, he caught a glimpse of Brittany being rushed away by unknown figures. Her last look back at him carried something he'd never seen in her eyes before. Genuine fear. Chapter 8. The Scales of Justice. The executive boardroom at Ashton Industries hummed with tension as Mark paced before the assembled team. 24 hours had passed since the chaos at the St. Regis. And the pieces were finally coming together. The drive contained a sophisticated virus. Isay reported. Her fingers flying over her keyboard. If it had connected to our systems, it would have given someone complete access to everything. Finances, projects, personal data, and the shooters. Mark turned to his head of security. Professional hit team. They weren't trying to kill anyone. It was a distraction to extract Brittany, extract her, Daniel frowned, or eliminate her. She's alive. Isay interrupted. Isay fixed on her screen. Facial recognition just picked her up at JFK boarding a private jet. With Chad Sterling, Mark stopped pacing. Where were they heading? Flight plan says Singapore, but I doubt that's their real destination. They're running, Daniel concluded. No. Mark shook his head. They're being moved. Someone wants them out of reach. George entered the room, his face grim. Victor Sterling was found dead in his cell an hour ago. Apparent suicide. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. Apparent? Mark asked quietly. He was under suicide watch. George replied. No sheets. No laces. Nothing he could use to harm himself. Yet somehow he managed to hang himself with a rope that materialized out of nowhere. S.A.'s fingers paused over her keyboard. This is bigger than corporate espionage, isn't it? Much bigger. Mark agreed. Someone's cleaning house. Making sure Chad and Brittany can't talk, eliminating Victor. The question is, talk about what? Daniel leaned forward. What could be worth all this? Mark turned to his father. When did you acquire Sterling Innovations? 6 months ago through shell companies. Why? And before that, who owned significant shares? George's eyes narrowed. A consortium of Asian investment firms. They sold under market value, which is why I was interested. Isa. Mark turned to her. Can you trace those firms? Her fingers flew over the keys again. They're complicated. Layers of shell companies, offshore accounts. Wait. She sat up straighter. They all lead back to one holding company. Phoenix Global. Never heard of them, Daniel said. That's because they don't exist. Isay's voice held a note of triumph. It's a front. And I think I know for who. She pulled up a series of documents on the main screen. Corporate filings, property records, bank transfers, all pointing to a familiar name. Maxwell Yu. George briefed. Of course. Who's Maxwell Yu? Daniel asked. The most dangerous man in Asian finance. George explained. He's been trying to break into the American market for years. But regulators kept blocking him due to connections with organized crime. So he created Phoenix Global. Mark continued the thought. Used it to buy into companies like Sterling Innovations. But why target us? Because 6 months ago we unknowingly disrupted his entire American operation when we took over Sterling Innovations. Isay explained. We didn't just buy a company. We exposed his network. And now he's cleaning up loose ends. Daniel concluded. Chad and Brittany know too much. Victor knew too much. Which means we know too much. Mark said quietly. The room fell silent again as the full implication settled in. Options. George asked. We could go to the authorities. Daniel suggested. With what proof? S.A. countered. Everything leads back to companies that don't exist. We could try to negotiate. George offered. You don't negotiate with people like you. Mark shook his head. We only have one option. We finish this. Now. How? Daniel asked. Mark turned to Isa. You said you traced their network. How far did you get? Far enough to find their weak points. She pulled up more data. Their entire operation relies on electronic transfers through specific servers. If we could access those servers, we could expose everything. Mark finished. Every transaction. Shell company. A legal deal. It would destroy them. George warned. And probably get us all killed. Not if we do it right. Mark straightened his tie. Isa. How long would you need? To breach their security? Hours. To document everything properly? Days. You have 12 hours. Mark decided. Daniel prepared documents for the SEC, FBI, and Interpol. Everything needs to be legally bulletproof. What are you going to do? George asked his son. I'm going to make a phone call. Mark pulled out his cell. To Singapore. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity. Isay worked tirelessly, breaking through layers of security while Daniel prepared legal documents. George mobilized his contacts in law enforcement and finance. And Mark waited. Finally, at midnight, Isay looked up from her computer. I'm in. You need to see this. The evidence was staggering. Years of illegal operations, billions in laundered money, dozens of compromised companies, and proof, undeniable proof, of Yu's involvement in everything from market manipulation to murder. Send it, Mark commanded. With a few keystrokes, Isay released the information to law enforcement agencies worldwide. Within minutes, phones started ringing throughout the office. FBI's moving in on their American operations. Daniel reported. Interpol's coordinating with Singapore authorities. George added. And you? Mark asked Isay. She checked her monitors. His private jet just took off from Singapore. He's running. No. Mark smiled grimly. He's coming here. What? I might have mentioned during our phone call that I have some interesting documents about his operations. Documents that could only be accessed in person. You baited him. Daniel realized. And he bit. Mark turned to his father. The trap is set. Now we wait. The wait wasn't long. 3 hours later, Maxwell Yu arrived at Ashden Tower, escorted by 2 massive bodyguards. He was a small man, impeccably dressed, with cold eyes and a colder smile. Mr. Ashden, he bowed slightly. Your invitation was intriguing. Mr. Yu, Mark gestured to a chair. Thank you for coming all this way. The documents? Safe. Like your operations were supposed to be, Yu's smile never wavered. Ah, so we know everything. Mark pulled up displays showing Yu's entire operation. And so do the FBI, Interpol, and it does other agencies. Yu's smile finally faltered. You were making a very serious mistake. No, you made the mistake. Using Chad and Brittany as pawns. Having Victor killed? Those were sloppy moves. They were loose ends. Yu's voice hardened. Like you were becoming. The difference is, Mark leaned forward. I'm not afraid of you. Yu gestured to his bodyguards who stepped forward menacingly. Before they could move further, the office doors opened. FBI agents poured in. Weapons drawn. Maxwell Yu. The lead agent announced. You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and murder. As the agents led you away, he turned to Mark one last time. You think this is victory? You understand nothing about power. No, Mark corrected him. I understand everything about power, including when not to use it. The next few days were a whirlwind of arrests, revelations, and media frenzy. Chad and Brittany were apprehended in Thailand, attempting to flee to a non-extradition country. They quickly turned on you, providing even more evidence of his crimes. In the end, the sentences were handed down. 15 years for you. 10 for Chad. 8 for Brittany. The empire they'd built crumbled, taking dozens of corrupt executives down with it. Chapter 9. The Price of Victory. Mark stood in his office, watching the sunset paint the city skyline and shades of gold. The past week's newspapers lay on his desk, headlines screaming about the fall of Maxwell Yu's criminal empire. Quite a view. Issei's voice came from the doorway. He turned to find her leaning against the frame, tablet in hand. The view's better from here now. She moved into the office, setting her tablet down. The last of Yu's accounts have been frozen. His network is completely dismantled. And Brittany? Cooperating fully with authorities. She sent you a letter. Issei held up an envelope. Want me to dispose of it? Mark considered for a moment, then took the envelope. Inside was a single page. Mark, I know these words mean nothing now, but I'm sorry. Not just for the affair, but for everything that came after. You were right. I never changed. Never learned. Until now, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that in the end, I finally understood what real strength looks like. Brittany. Quite a transformation. Issei commented, reading over his shoulder. People can change. Mark set the letter down. If they want it badly enough. Speaking of change, she moved closer. What happens now? Now. Mark turned to face her. Now we rebuild. The community center project is back on track. We're launching new initiatives for affordable housing, educational programs. Going back to your roots, with a difference. He smiled. Now I have the power to make real change, and someone to share it with. Issei's breath caught as he took her hand. Mark, you've been by my side through all of this. He continued, keeping me grounded, reminding me who I really am. I couldn't have done any of this without you. I just did my job. No. He pulled her closer. You did much more than that. You showed me that revenge isn't the answer. That real power comes from using your strength to help others. And now I'd like to see where this goes. If you're interested. Instead of answering, Issei leaned up and kissed him. When they parted, both were smiling. A knock at the door interrupted them. George entered, followed by Daniel. Hope I'm not interrupting. George's eyes twinkled knowingly. Perfect timing. Actually, Mark kept hold of Issei's hand. We were just discussing the future. About that, Daniel held up some papers. The board approved all your new initiatives. The Ashton Foundation for Community Development is officially launched. And the old Sterling properties? Mark asked. Being converted into affordable housing and community spaces, George confirmed. Just like you wanted. Mark looked around at the people gathered in his office. His father, who had given him the tools to fight back. Daniel, who had stood by him through everything. And Issei, who had shown him a better way to use his power. He said thoughtfully. When this all started, I thought victory meant destroying my enemies. Now I realize it means becoming someone they could never be. And who's that? Essay asked. Someone who uses power to build, not destroy. Someone who remembers where he came from. He squeezed her hand. Someone worthy of the people who believed in him. The sun had fully set now, the city lights twinkling like stars. In his office atop Ashton Tower, Mark Ashton had finally found his true purpose. The revenge that had driven him had transformed into something greater. A mission to make real change in the world. So, Daniel grinned. When's the wedding? Issei threw a pin at him while Mark laughed. George watched them all with paternal pride, seeing in his son the leader he had always hoped he would become. The story that had begun with betrayal and revenge had evolved into something more. A tale of redemption. Of love found in unexpected places. And of power used for good rather than vengeance. Mark pulled Issei closer, thinking of all the possibilities ahead. He had learned his lesson about trust and true values, emerging stronger and wiser. Now, with Issei by his side and his newfound purpose clear, he was ready to write the next chapter of his life. One focused not on retribution but on making a real difference in the world. The night deepened over Manhattan as they began making plans for the future. In his father's proud smile, Daniel's unwavering friendship, and Issei's loving gaze, Mark found something better than revenge. He found his true legacy. Epilogue. 5 years later. The Ashton Community Center buzzed with activity as children raced through its halls, their laughter echoing off walls adorned with colorful artwork. In the main atrium, a bronze plaque caught the morning light. The George Ashton Memorial Wing dedicated to empowering future generations. Mark Ashton stood before the plaque, his fingers tracing his father's name. At 37, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had found his true purpose. The past 5 years had transformed both him and Ashton Industries in ways few could have predicted. The art therapy class is starting. Issei's voice came from behind him. She approached, her pregnant belly visible beneath her elegant maternity dress. You promised the kids you'd sit in today. Mark smiled at his wife of 4 years. Wouldn't miss it? How's our future CEO doing? Active. Issei rubbed her stomach. Takes after her father. Always busy, always planning. They walked together through the center, passing classrooms filled with children learning everything from coding to music. What had started as a single community center had grown into a network of facilities across the city, each offering education and opportunities to underprivileged communities. Daniel called. Issei mentioned as they walked. The latest round of housing projects just got approved. 20 new developments, all with integrated community spaces and educational facilities. He's done amazing work with the legal framework. Mark nodded. How's Sarah? Do any day now? He's nervous about being a first-time father. Tell him it gets easier. Mark chuckled, thinking of their 3-year-old son, George Jr., named after his grandfather who had passed away 2 years ago. They reached the art therapy room, where a dozen children sat at easels, their faces bright with concentration. The instructor, a familiar face, looked up as they entered. Mark, Issei, Brittany greeted them quietly. After serving 3 years of her 8-year sentence, Brittany had been released early for good behavior and cooperation. To everyone's surprise, she had reached out to Mark, not asking for money or favors, but for a chance to make amends. Now she taught her therapy at the center, working with children from troubled backgrounds. The kids are making real progress, she reported, her clothes and social climbing days long behind her. Tommy's especially talented. His work's being featured in the youth art exhibition next month. Mark watched as she returned to helping a young girl with her painting, noting how different she was from the woman who had once mocked his charitable work. Prison had changed her, but it was her own choice to become someone better that had truly transformed her. Later that afternoon, Mark sat in his office at Ashton Tower, reviewing quarterly reports. Under his leadership, Ashton Industries had evolved into something new, a corporation that measured success not just in profits, but in positive social impact. The Singapore expansion is complete, Daniel announced, entering with a stack of papers. At 37, his friend had grown into his role as chief legal officer, though he still maintained his quick wit and loyal heart. The new tech training center there will open next month. And the old Sterling properties? All converted. The last of the luxury developments has been reimagined as mixed-income housing with integrated community spaces. Daniel sat down, loosening his tie. You know, Chet's up for parole next year. Mark nodded. Unlike Brittany, Chet had shown no signs of reformation during his imprisonment. Let him be. He's not our concern anymore. Maxwell, you died in prison last month. Daniel added. Heart attack. I saw the news. Mark's expression remained neutral. His organization? Gone. Between our exposures in the International Task Force, there's nothing left. His sons tried to rebuild legitimately. Actually reached out about possible collaboration on educational initiatives in Asia. Interesting. Mark made a note to explore that possibility. Redemption, he had learned, could come from unexpected places. A video called Notification popped up on his screen. The quarterly board meeting. The faces that appeared were diverse now, including community leaders and education experts, alongside the traditional business executives. The Ashton Foundation's results this quarter are exceptional. The board chair began. The combination of profitable business ventures and social impact programs has exceeded all projections. Mark listened as the reports rolled in. Successful technology initiatives, thriving community programs, expanding educational opportunities. The vision he had built from the ashes of his old life had become a model for corporate responsibility. After the meeting, he found ISA in her office. Now the headquarters of Ashton Industries' cybersecurity division, which he ran with the same precision and insight that had helped bring down Yu's empire. Ready for dinner? He asked. We're meeting Daniel and Sarah at that new place in Brooklyn. Just finishing up. She typed a few commands. Did you see the latest security analysis? Someone tried to breach our systems yesterday. Serious. Amateur hour. She smirked. Probably corporate espionage. But nothing like what we dealt with before. Our systems are solid. As they rode the elevator down, Mark reflected on how much had changed. The wound of betrayal that had once driven him had healed, replaced by something stronger. A commitment to building rather than destroying. They picked up George Jr. from the Towers Daycare Center, where he spent his afternoons helping run the company, as he liked to tell anyone who would listen. At 3, he already showed signs of both his father's determination and his mother's sharp mind. The restaurant was in a neighborhood that had been transformed by one of their development projects. Where there had once been abandoned buildings, there now stood a vibrant community hub, surrounded by affordable housing and small businesses. Daniel and Sarah were waiting at their table. Sarah's pregnancy even more advanced than ISS. The two couples had grown closer over the years. Their children would grow up together, just as Mark and Daniel had always hoped. To old friends, Daniel raised his glass of wine. And new beginnings, ISS added, touching her water glass to his. After dinner, as they walked through the neighborhood, Mark pointed out various buildings to his son, explaining how they had been transformed. George Jr. listened with wide eyes, already showing an interest in his father's work of building and improving. Daddy, the boy asked, why do you make buildings for people? Mark exchanged glances with ISS before answering, because everyone deserves a chance to build a good life, son, and sometimes they just need someone to give them that chance. Back home in their penthouse, a different one from his days with Brittany. In a building they had developed themselves. Mark stood on the balcony with ISS watching the city lights. Any regrets? She asked softly. About what? About not staying on the revenge path. About choosing to build instead of destroy. Mark pulled her close, feeling their unborn daughter kick between them. Never. Revenge would have made me like them. This made me better. Inside, George Jr. was already asleep in his room, surrounded by building blocks and drawings. His own little empires in the making. On Mark's desk lay the plans for next year's initiatives. More community centers, educational programs, housing developments. The empire he had inherited had become a force for positive change, touching lives in ways his younger self could never have imagined. The next morning brought a surprise visitor to his office, Victor Sterling's grandson, now a young man of 22. Mr. Ashton. The young man fidgeted nervously. I'm not here to cause trouble. I want to learn. To understand how to use wealth and power the right way. Mark studied him thoughtfully, remembering his own journey. Have you ever considered working with our community development program? The conversation that followed reminded Mark of how far he had come from his days of seeking revenge. Here was the next generation of the family that had once threatened to destroy him, now seeking guidance on how to do good in the world. Later that week, at the opening of their newest educational facility, Mark stood at the podium looking out at the gathered crowd. He saw Brittany in the audience, sitting with her art therapy students. Daniel and Sarah were there, along with Issei and George Jr. Community leaders, business partners, and beneficiaries of their programs filled the seats. 5 years ago, he began. I thought power meant having the ability to destroy your enemies. I learned through the guidance of some very wise people that real power lies in the ability to build, to lift others up, to create positive change. He gestured to the building behind him. This facility isn't just about education or opportunity. It's about transformation. About choosing to become something better than what life initially offered you. I know this because it's my story too. The applause that followed wasn't just for his words, but for the living proof of transformation they could all see around them. The man who had once sought revenge had become a builder of dreams, a creator of opportunities, a force for positive change. That evening, as he helped George Jr. with his building blocks while Issei worked on her laptop nearby, Mark reflected on the true meaning of victory. It wasn't in the defeat of enemies or the accumulation of power. It was in the lives changed. The communities built, the legacy of positive change that would outlive him. The empire he had inherited and transformed would pass to his children, but not just as a business. It would pass to them as a mission, a responsibility, a chance to continue building a better world. Look, Daddy. George Jr. held up his block creation. I built a city. Yes, you did, son. Mark smiled, seeing in his child's eyes the future of his legacy. And someday you'll build real ones. As night fell over their city, Mark Ashton, once driven by revenge but now guided by purpose, held his family close. The wounds of the past had healed, replaced by the joy of creation, the satisfaction of positive change, and the love of those who had helped him become not just successful but truly victorious. In the end, his story had become not one of revenge, but of redemption, not of destruction, but of creation, not of power wielded in anger, but of strength used to lift others up. And in that transformation lay his greatest victory of all.